your insurance company would have paid for the damage to his car. Simple as that. And we wouldn't be here. You don't have to agree with me.
Okay, so it is o'clock. Again, we will give individuals maybe just a few minutes if they're running a few minutes behind to join the meeting. In the meantime, if you have a second, please focus your attention on the Zoom group chat if you're joining by computer. We have some messages from community members as well as the project team, and greetings obviously to everyone. Just to note, we are recording this meeting, so it will be available for public consumption.
Hi all, how you guys doing?
Hi.
Hello.
Fine.
Oh,
Fine.
I was just a booting and about. Okay.
All right, so the time is now 3:02. So I think we can go ahead and get started. Just as a courtesy reminder, again, I did state this a little bit a few minutes ago, but we are recording this meeting and it will be available for public consumption. So that is something to please continue to consider throughout the meeting process. My name is Natalie Manning. I am the outreach specialist for this particular project, as well as the portfolio of projects and programs within the Gentilly Resilience District. The Blue and Green Corridors project is one of the more expansive in terms of its footprint, because it does incorporate quite a bit of really strategic neutral ground spaces in Gentilly that currently exist and that people currently traverse and go about to and fro on a regular basis. So this is a very important project. I'm gonna admit a couple people to the waiting room. I mean, from the waiting room. So before I share my screen, I just kind of want to let you guys know what the process will look like. Right now, we can all see each other's lovely faces. Thanks to all who are sharing their video. You know, during COVID pandemic, it's difficult to make that human connection. So I do think that moving these meetings to a virtual platform in which we're still able to engage and see smiling faces and look into the eyes of our fellow community members and colleagues, I think that helps to create and foster that human bond that we might be losing and right now. So thank you guys who are sharing your video. You know, no problem for those that don't feel comfortable doing that. I do want to just make sure that you guys are aware of the Zoom group chat that should be to the right of your screen. There are messages that are being posted by participants, community members, as well as the project team. So if you have a minute, just take a look at that. That'll also be the way that you can submit any questions or feedback, excuse me, But I will ask that, you know, you make sure that you keep your microphone muted so that if you're not speaking, everyone can be able to hear the same information. Technology is not always the most forgiving, and it's sometimes misbehaved. So please allow me to apologize in advance if anything looks blurry or if you're not able to get all of the information. We will be making this presentation that we show you today available on our website, as well as social media platforms. So please look out for that in the event that you're missing anything and we need to review something, okay? So at this point, I'm going to share my screen. Again, if it comes through a little bit blurry initially, give it a minute. It typically, depending on your computer, maybe a few minutes before you can actually see it. And also thanks to those who may be joining by phone and not viewing with a computer right now. All right, so I'm gonna admit some individuals to the call, and then I'll be sharing my screen. Okay. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Will. Awesome, sounds good. Again, thank you for everyone that has taken the time their afternoon. It's a lovely day today to join us on this virtual meeting so that we can provide an update for the Blue and Green Corridors project. Many of you have received a note or mention of this meeting either through the banners that we have put on the neutral ground spaces or the mailer that may have come to your home, as well as perhaps on social media. So however you heard about the meeting, we appreciate you being here and thank you for taking the time. A couple of these house rules we touched on already earlier in the conversation. We just want to make sure that your mute button is on while the presentation is live. There will be an opportunity to unmute yourself at the end of the presentation. And again, ask questions verbally or ask questions through the chat function. We do ask as much as you possibly can to ask questions via the chat function. It just makes the process a little bit easier.
What's that?
1 second. Okay, I am so sorry. Life happens. So in addition to, we also ask that you could use our as well. You can text 941-0048 during the presentation, and then we'll save those questions till the end of the presentation, and we can share those with the group and answer them at that time. For more information on the project, you can see the link below. Again, the presentation will be available on that website as well. And then you can also get more information on this project by texting 677-873.
I'm on that meeting with those. Yeah.
Again, I
That
do
number's
ask
supposed
that
to call in.
if you're on the call, could you please mute your
Can
line?
everyone put their phones on mute? I cannot hear anyone talking.
Thank you. Please mute your phones if you're not speaking. Thank you. Okay, so as far as the presentation, I'm sorry, the agenda goes, we're going to do the presentation first, and then question and answer will be following that. In addition to this community update for the Blue and Green Corridors project, we'll also be doing a resilience design review committee meeting for this particular project, which is at 90% design completion, as well as a design update for the 30% design completion of City Park project, which is a hazard mitigation project, in addition to Paul Haben's Charter School Green Infrastructure Project. So if you're here for the Blue and Green Corridors project, please know that you're welcome to drop off at 4 o'clock or after the question and answer period. And if you want to be a part of the design review committee, you're welcome to come back on at 4:35, which is around the time that we'll get started with that design review. But I will remind you that the information that we present during the RDRC meeting will be the same presentation that we'll be presenting during the community update. The only difference being we'll allow the committee an opportunity to give their feedback and review the presentation at that time. So that'll be the difference. So without further delay, we can get started with the presentation for Blue and Green Corridors. Again, my name is Natalie Manning. I am with the Roadwork NOLA team. My particular portfolio is resilience and sustainability projects, specifically those that are included in the Gentilly Resilience District portfolio. The rest of the members from the project team, I'll go ahead and allow them to introduce themselves at this time.
Hi, I'm Will Bain. I'm with Stantec. I'm the project manager on the design side of this project.
Hi, I'm Brooke Morris. I'm with Porcella Design. I'm a sub-consultant to Stantec. Mary, you're muted.
Hello?
Mary, you're muted. Okay. I don't know if we've lost Mary, but Mary Kincaid is the project manager for this project. She's also the program manager for the Sustainable Infrastructure Program, which includes resilience and sustainability portfolio projects as well. Is there anyone else from the design team, sub-consultants, that would like to take the time to introduce themselves?
I think we have a few of our members on, but we can probably just keep going and try to convey some of this information.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so I'll start from here. We're going to format this presentation so that it's kind of a question and answer. So I'll pose the questions and some of the team members will reply to them. If you have any questions, put them in the chat function, or you can text them to 504-941-0048, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, my first question is for Mary Kincaid. Who decided we were going to do this project, and how is this project funded?
Thank you, Brooke. So the city put together an urban water plan back in 2013. That was an interdisciplinary plan with several agencies, and it really created the vision for how we're living with water and managing stormwater. Before we go any further, can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay! So the projects that we have been doing that are kind of under our urban water plan, we've been using FEMA hazard mitigation money. So after you have a disaster, FEMA will come in and they'll say, you know, we're going to give you a certain amount of money to prevent this type of damage from happening again. But their funding is very strict. It can only be used for things directly related to stormwater management. With this funding that we have right now, the funding from HUD that funds this project, we're able to do other things that are tied in with overall resilience of the community. So for instance, tonight people are going to see play spaces, they're going to see facilities for pedestrians and bicycles, and that really relates to the overall resiliency of the community in terms of responding to a disaster. Responding to a disaster is not just things like getting the floodwaters out, it's also restoring people back to jobs and their normal functions. You're also going to see features in this project that are intended to mitigate urban heat. Right now, 77% of our days in New Orleans are days where we have to use energy to cool our homes and businesses. We're not yet at the point where 77% of our days are flooding days. So reducing urban heat is very important to us as well.
So my next question was, how is this project envisioned for the HUD NDR application?
In the original grant application that we made, this is a competitive grant application. And so New Orleans is one of a handful of cities that received this money. And we proposed having projects in a neighborhood all around the theme of living with water. So not just eliminating water, getting it out of the streets and getting it, you know, pumped into Lake Pontchartrain as quickly as possible, but how can we work with the existing pump capacity so that without upgrading our massive pumps, we can still prevent flooding, but prevent flooding in a way that brings us these other benefits, the benefits of reducing heat, the benefits of preventing soil subsidence because we're storing more water in the soil and not constantly pumping the soil and draining the soil down.
Okay, Natalie, can we move 2 slides? So I understand that the HUD funding can be used to address more than flooding. So you've touched on Heat Island. What are some of the other benefits that are associated with HUD funding?
One of the things that we have that is really exciting is the way that these are place-making activities. And placemaking is defined as something that causes the community to come together and something that has members of the community that would not normally interact with each other come together and spend time. So for instance, a fountain, a playground, a walking trail, these are activities where people that are of different ages, you know, can come out and meet. And why would HUD be interested in placemaking? Well, they felt that you were much less likely to knock on your neighbor's door and ask them if they needed help evacuating or help boarding up if you've never spoken to them before. So in addition to the benefits that you see on the screen and what we've talked about before, you know, notice that we have community under here, and community is a really big part of how we respond to disasters.
Thank you, Mary. My next questions are for Will Bain with Stantec. Your firm won the competitive RFP process to be working on this project. And how did you begin to wrap your head around all the goals, especially flood reduction?
Well, it's been a very interesting project as we've started it and gone along. And there were some ideas of what the project should be at the beginning, but those weren't set in stone. We wanted to make sure that the project addressed a lot of concerns for the residents, needed to hit a lot of places. And so we actually didn't start with this is what the project is going to be. We identified problems. We talked with residents and community leaders to identify other problems, and it's been a developing process as we've gone along. I think everybody would know that in the Gentilly area that flooding is a big concern. That's one of the main things that this project really has to address for it to be successful. And so we looked around to see where there was flooding, why there was flooding, if those problems can be addressed, whether there's some other solutions we can use to try to look at it holistically and really have the project come out at the end where you can see a noticeable difference. And so that's kind of just where we started, and then we've developed it as we've gone along.
Next slide. Can you tell us a bit about this graphic? How was it made? What does it show us?
Sure. And so understanding why flooding happens, it's actually pretty complicated, and there's a lot of things that interact and it changes over time or how much rainfall there is. And so we've done modeling to figure out where the flooding is happening, and then you can find the root causes for that. And so this map shows the Gentilly area during a 10-year storm, which is a pretty big storm. And it's color-coded depending on how deep the water's gotten. And then the purple and the blues, those all show areas where there's a significant amount of flooding. And you can see inside that black box, that's really where this project is located, Robert E. Lee and Elysian Fields. And you can see that there's a significant amount of color in there. And so we know there's flooding, and we're able to identify areas where we think the most flooding is happening.
So this isn't the first time that you've met with the public. What are some of the past events that you've held?
Yeah, so as I just mentioned, we wanted to start out without coming up with a project and designing it and then taking to the public and saying, this is the project you're going to get. I hope you like it. We started with a blank piece of paper, and we started first meeting with the community leaders and asking what their concerns were and what opportunities they saw. And then we took that and we had a design workshop with the public, and we had people put stickers on maps and make notes saying, I know that this catch basin always floods over here, or this area over here is an issue. And so we've taken those comments that we received from the public, and then we've used those to shape the design. And then after we took those comments and came up with a project that we thought best identified those, we then went back to the residents with more developed maps and projects where we showed where the improvements were going to be, where the parks were going to be, where the biking paths and walking paths and flood reduction elements would be, just to check back in, to make sure that what we heard was correct. And they still agreed with our approach. And then we took the feedback from that and have adjusted the design farther to take it to a 90% design, which is where we are now.
Oh, that turned out a little blue. So this is, can you tell us more about this slide? You've answered most of my question about.
We were able to get a lot of information through various means, through surveys, through discussions, through ways where they can vote for certain things that they would prefer. And so this is just one example. There's a word cloud of the words we heard most frequently, words like safety and bike path and maintenance and flooding. And so we knew that these were concerns or opportunities that the residents had identified. And then the preference survey were just other, those are just other things that we identified that we were hearing most frequently.
Okay, so the next question might be best answered by Natalie. How has engagement shifted or continued during COVID? Natalie?
I had to unmute myself. Yeah, thanks, Brooke. So in terms of post-pandemic or during the pandemic, we just wanted to make sure that we were still engaging the community. Part of community engagement, as far as I'm concerned, is being able to look in the eyes of the community members and be able to conversationally speak to them about what is happening, because, you know, the whole idea of the project is to engage the community in the process, so that it's something that's happening with them and not at them or to them, that we're doing it in collaboration. So of course, you know, we didn't want we wanted that online, that engagement to transition to post-pandemic reality that we're currently living in. So in addition to, you know, meeting in a virtual space, which is what we're currently doing, we've also been thinking of ways to diversify those means and methods. One of which, obviously, and that has been very impactful and that we've gotten a lot of feedback on, has been the banners that we recently posted along several of the corridors within the project footprint. So you'll see these banners. Most of you, or a lot of you on the call, may have already seen these banners along the Elysian Fields neutral ground. And they include, obviously, renderings of what we envision the project to look like at completion, and to provide that vision for the community as well, so that, you know, it's not words that they're seeing, but they're actually seeing what this could look like at scale. So thanks to all who provided their feedback to that. So that's one way in which we're continuing to keep the community informed of what's happening with the project. In addition to that, I think a lot of people also got the mailer that we sent out to the individuals that are located within the direct project footprint. And that information went out in the mailer based on your respective corridor. So the mailer that you got was one of 4, and we made sure that we cater that mailer to what you should be expecting for the project in your immediate area or your immediate neighborhood within the project footprint. Additionally, we wanted to also make sure, and just throughout the process of, you know, doing what is maybe deemed as something innovative and fresh and new, although green space is nothing new. We've been living with green space, especially in Philly, for a long time, but green infrastructure is a way of creating the natural environment into a form and function to where it can not only be aesthetically pleasant and create social and recreational spaces, but that it can also function as a way for us to temporarily retain stormwater. So with that being said, we wanted to also make sure that we keep the youth engaged throughout that process. So what we came up with was an educational activity and coloring book where kids can start familiarizing themselves with these concepts. Because at the end of the day, be resilient and create these type of projects to be resilient for the now. But if we don't have the interest, if we don't have the buy-in of young people, then we won't be able to sustain this in the future. So understanding that we created this, and hopefully it will proliferate, and we'll start to see more conversations about this in multi-generational forums and settings.
Thank you, Natalie. So finally, what does this project consist of? I understand that it's been, because of its scale, it's been broken into phases. Will, can you tell me what the project consists of in each of the phases?
Sure. So phase 1, this is the biggest portion of the project. This has the 2 biggest streets, and we also knew that flooding was one of the biggest concerns, and so we identified phase 1 as being the areas where we wanted to have the most flood reduction impact. And so phase 1 is on Robert E. Lee Boulevard between the London Avenue Canal and Franklin Avenue, and then Elysian Fields Avenue between Robert E. Lee Boulevard and then Fillmore Avenue down towards the south. And both streets will have a significant amount of stormwater storage. And so when it rains, these areas fill up with water so that it takes some of that stress off the pumping system. It keeps the water from entering in houses and cars. Both of these streets address that. This project will also provide walking paths along both these areas with really nice landscaped areas, really high intensity landscaping, trees and shrubs and plants. And then along Robert E. Lee, there'll be curb bump outs, which are the rain gardens that help infiltrate the water, and they also help reduce floods and reduce subsidence. And then there's also playgrounds and exercise equipment scattered throughout to give places where people want to go. The placemaking that Mary talked about in the beginning of this meeting.
Thanks, Will. So on the next slide, y'all have probably seen versions of these renderings in both the mailers and the banners. Can you tell me what is going on in each, Will?
Sure. These renderings show what the project will look like after it's been constructed and had some time for the trees to grow out. So there's a water feature that runs down Elysian Fields, and there'll be walking paths along that, pedestrian bridges so you can cross over. You can see that there's lots of trees and shrubs and things planted. Playground equipment for the kids to enjoy. I think we've included playground equipment for kind of all ages. I've got a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, and 11-year-old, so that's really nice. And then there's some open spaces where people can go have a picnic on a nice day.
Thank you.
if I might add, Brooke, I just, I also want to just make a note of the water features as are pictured in these renderings. I just want people to be more comfortable with what we're seeing here, because I think sometimes when we talk about water within your neighborhood footprint, people tend to think of that with the adverse reaction. What we're picturing here is a way that we can incorporate water and retain water for the use of flood reduction, but also create spaces and places where the community can engage with one another. And, even if they're just sitting by it and reflecting, but this is also meant to add an aesthetic feature to the neighborhood as well.
Thanks, Natalie. So what do these playgrounds consist of?
I'm really going to be impressed when it's finished, because there's some really nice playground equipment. There's slides and musical chimes. There's jungle gyms for kids to climb on. There's some toddler playground equipment for the smaller kids. There's balance beams and things to climb over. So I have a 5-year-old, and he saw me looking at some of these pictures, and he asked if we could go there, and I had to tell him that it's not quite done yet, but when he's a little bit older, we can go there.
And what about the adults? One of the project goals was active recreation.
Yes, and so this is a way to get people out of their houses, give them a place to go and stay healthy. And so along the paths that go around the project, and so you can go have a nice walk. But there's also stations that you can stop at and perform various exercises and just keep physically fit. And those have been scattered around, so you can create a route for yourself, and you can go through and you always stop here to do upright rows or cycling.
Thanks, Will. So phase 1 consists of Elysian Fields and Robert E. Lee. What is going on Robert E. Lee, and what is a bump out?
So the bump outs are where we take the corners of the intersections where you're not able to park, and then we reutilize that space and remove some of the concrete and replace it with a rain garden. And so that helps infiltrate some water, which takes some load off of the pumping system. It also helps reduce subsidence and re-wet the groundwater. It also narrows the street, just so when you're going across a crosswalk, you don't have to go across both the parking lane and the travel lane in order to get where you're going. And so it makes it safer for pedestrians. And we're able to landscape within these rain gardens so that it's aesthetically pleasing. And then another benefit for these is they also help filter and treat the water, so the water quality is improved as well.
Thanks, Will. So both Elysian Fields and Robert E. Lee have bike lanes. What's the difference between a regular and a protected bike lane, and which do we have on this project?
So this is an area that's changed a lot recently, where there's sometimes people want to share the road. And so you have bikes and cars in the same place, and that's the least preferable one, because a lot of, especially inexperienced bikers, they don't feel safe doing that. And then cars are worried about hitting the bicyclists. So then you can have a bike lane where the two of them are separated by just a little bit of striping, and that's better. But what's really best is to have those protected, where you have a buffer between those two,
Hey,
where you have the little plastic bollards between them. And so the bicyclists feel like, this is my lane, I can stay over here. And then the cars are in their lane, and they don't feel like they interact as much. And so that's been shown to increase ridership, because you feel safer doing it, and it's also shown to be safer just through accident reports. And so both along Robert E. Lee and Elysian Fields, we have protected bike lanes that provide that buffer to keep the bikes and cars from getting too close.
So my next question is for Natalie in the same slide. Back, Natalie. How did these bike lanes fit into the bidder strategy for moving New Orleans? Natalie?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself again. That dreaded mute button. Yeah, so thank you. Thank you, Brooke. So yeah, so the mayor's initiative is all about complete infrastructure. So when we're talking about infrastructure, there are diverse means and methods where we can use in terms of making the city more friendly for vehicular traffic as well as pedestrian traffic, whether that be dog walkers or people that are on bikes. So with that said, the Moving New Orleans initiative, the first part of that is creating bike infrastructure that is safe for bicyclists, as well as a way that we can make sure that, you know, vehicular traffic and pedestrian or bike traffic can coexist. And that is a multimodal strategy. Again, what the administration is focusing on right now is the bike aspect of that. But the idea is for us to have very complete street landscapes that, you know, are conducive for both vehicular and pedestrian traffic.
Thank you, Natalie. So I actually saw in the chat function was my next question is, I understand that there's bump outs and bike lanes that are to be part of phase 2. Where are those at on Fillmore? Will?
I'm sorry, on Fillmore?
Yes, Fillmore. Can you switch slides, Natalie?
Yes. So phase 2 of the project will come next. We've already taken that to 60% design, and that'll go to 90% design next. And Fillmore is similar to Robert E. Lee, where we're proposing bump outs at the corners, walking paths down the neutral ground in the middle. We're also doing some reduction in the pavement. I think along the east side, it's not really striped for the normal lanes. I think each lane is 30 feet wide, which is way more than needed. And so that'll come next. We're moving towards final design on that one. And so these projects have been separated a little bit just to allow for multiple contractors and some give the city some better prices. And that one will be similar, where it'll have landscaping and destinations to go to.
So how is this similar or different than Robert E. Lee?
It's very similar to Robert E. Lee, except for along Robert E. Lee for the middle portion. In order to keep the water moving and also add a lot of aesthetic value, we have pumps that'll circulate the water around so it never sits and stagnates. And so there'll be a nice stream running that has some riffles, and you'll see some interesting features on that. Fillmore isn't quite as wide, and there's some other utilities that are in the way. And so it'll feel like a very normal streetscape that has some depressed areas in the neutral grounds that'll also help alleviate flooding.
Okay. Thank you. And finally, what's phase 3?
Phase 3 will be really exciting because it's not focused on the streets like phase 1 and phase 2. There's 6 lots the city owns on Robert E. Lee Boulevard, both at St. Anthony and St. Roch. And those are areas where we can really identify really good placemaking, really good playground equipment, stormwater storage in kind of depressed areas that'll fill up during a rainfall event. I think we've planned for some sort of climbing walls or some event spaces, lighting and fountains. And so those will feel very recreational, very public gathering space focused. And those aren't quite as far along in the design process, but we have identified some really neat opportunities.
Next slide. So this shows it during dry weather, correct? And then the next slide shows it during wet weather.
Yes, and so if you just look at, once Natalie switches between these slides, this is a dry day, and so there's some water areas we've identified, and maybe there'll be some water that's there that you could go up and walk over a dock onto, or there's just have a picnic. But then on a rainy day when you wouldn't want to be out there, a lot of those areas will fill up with storm water, and again, we're using that area to store the rainwater and keep it out of people's homes and cars.
Thank you. So finally, is this project successful in achieving flood reduction?
We really feel it is. At the beginning of these slides, we saw the map showing the different colored areas for flooding. This is the next step in that. This is where we take the improvements that we've included, the stormwater storage and the rain gardens, and we look to see what the effect of those are on water surfaces. And the blue dots, actually all of the dots that are colored there, those show improvements, meaning that the flood water will go down. And we've targeted these so that the most flood reduction happens at the areas with the most flooding. And so we're seeing between 2 feet and 6 inches of flood reduction in a lot of areas. But this system is also interconnected within the city. Pump stations help out other pump stations depending on where the rain is or where the flooding is. And so this connection, by reducing flooding in this area, we're able to take some of the stress off pump station number 19, which is to the south. And so we've also found that there's a reduction in flooding through a larger area of the city than just where this project is.
Thank you, Will. So finally, the question I get the most about this project is it really going to happen? And if so, when?
Yes, we've had a schedule all along for this project, and we've made sure to stick with that schedule because there's a completion date that we need to hit. And so we've already done 30% and 60% submissions. This is a 90% submission, which means it's very close. And so there's some final reviews and some final changes that need to happen to get to 100%. But this is on track for construction to begin this coming winter. And then construction would be complete in fall of 2022. And so, you know, it's within sighting distance.
Thank you. So thank you all for joining us. Please shoot us your questions either through text or through the chat function. And we will start going through some of those questions. Natalie, can you see the questions? Do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So I just to let you guys know, I just stopped sharing the screen. So all of those that are joining by video, everyone's faces are now available for everyone to see. Thank you. And so I will start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through what we have via the chat function right now. Let's see. Excuse me. So these will be answered in real time, but we can also provide these questions, make a note of them and provide these questions, provide these answers via email as well. So the first question from Ross Lewis. Thank you, Ross. Can we expect that the flooding event from June, even if it was linked to sewage and water board pumping issues, to be something solved by this project? For example, would the street flooding from heavy rains that entered homes near or around Avery Alexander Cabdo School be solved by this project?
So I don't want to promise that this will solve any flooding because flooding is a big issue and there's different rainfall events. What I can say is that this will improve flooding. We're creating spaces for that flood water to go where it's not going to damage somebody's property. And we're buying those pumps some time. And so if we're able to take some of that water and store it, it gives those pumps a little bit more time to catch up. Because it all will eventually get pumped out into the lake. And so there will be measurable improvements from this. And I think everybody will be able to notice that.
Thanks, Will. Mary, would you like to add anything to that?
No, ma'am. That was great.
Awesome. All right. Next question from Miss Ellen Moore. Ellen, thank you for submitting your question. What is the immediate effect? Wait, what is the immediate effect and from what street to what?
I think she's asking what the project area will be. And so for this phase 1, it's Robert E. Lee in between London Avenue Canal and Franklin Avenue. And then right about in the middle of that is where Elysian Fields connects Robert E. Lee. And so it's along it's along Elysian Fields down to Fillmore. Then phase 2 of the project is Fillmore within those same boundaries. And then phase 3 are those 6 lots that I mentioned along Robert E. Lee.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Ellen, for your question. Please remember, oh, I'm sorry, that was a comment. How will this help the 500 block of Warrington Drive that flooded this week and at every thunderstorm since I have been here since 1971?
I think the way this project can help your block is what we found was there was a lot of stormwater coming in from the north. And I think it's the whole university area. And so there's a lot of flood water that has to go down through the neighborhood. And then I think it gets picked up on Robert E. Lee, and then it goes over to St. Anthony, and then it goes down to the pump station. So I think it's along that path. And so all of that stormwater is using up some of the capacity of the pumps and the drainage pipes. And along Robert E. Lee, we will be intercepting some of that water and storing it. And so I think on that area, there will be some immediate impact as we're able to store some of that water that causes flooding in the area.
Okay. Thanks for that question. And you know the answer. What is the rationale for stopping the project at Fillmore and not continuing south to Marabou?
I think we would love
Natalie,
to,
I'll take that one.
Okay.
Sorry, Will. I owe you a Coke. So it's just funding. We actually do have plans for expansion that we're pursuing other funding for. What we're presenting to you today is what is fully funded.
Thanks, Mary, and thanks, C. Greer, for that question. Kevin Jones asked, how did you arrive at the boundary of Fillmore and Elysian Fields Avenue? And is there a future plan for Elysian Fields south of this boundary?
I think that touches on the same question Mary was just answering.
Yeah.
Just south of Fillmore would be going towards Marabou.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. From Christy Jacobs Stanley, I'm in the footprint on Prentice right off Elysian Fields. I'm very excited about this project and have been engaged since the meetings at Avery Alexander. Thanks, Christy. There is thread on Nextdoor with neighbors who haven't heard about this project until now. Is there a plan to educate people in the neighborhood in an easy to understand way for them to understand this is a helpful project?
I think
I was going to say, I think I can feel that from a community engagement standpoint. First, thanks, Christy, for being involved with the process from the very beginning. As a requirement of this grant that funds these projects, we are, the expectation is that we are out in the community and not only soliciting feedback, but taking that feedback we saw earlier in the slide deck, taking that feedback back and integrating it into the design. So everything that you've seen that we have presented up to 90% has taken shape based on the feedback that we've gotten in these different community engagement events that we've held. I do apologize to anyone who has not been able to have their voice at that table and be aware of this meeting. Hopefully now, through the signage, through the different mailers that we're sending out, hopefully now we have a broader audience of individuals that are now understanding this project. And we're always here as a project team, myself as an outreach specialist, Mary as the project manager. We're always here for questions if those do come up. We are nearing the construction phase. So while this is the advanced phase of the design process, we will have another meeting. Mary, do we have a meeting at 100% or is this the last meeting before pre-con?
There'll be another meeting at 100%, especially if there are any significant changes. What we're going to do between now and 100% is pivot to what we're calling stewardship, which is like, what are these spaces going to look like? And looking at some of the questions that are coming up later, there are questions about, like, how will this project how we're going to prevent mosquitoes from being in the project. So that'll be answered in the stewardship questions, but we're always, we're going to come to that in just a minute anyway.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your question, Christy. Appreciate that. So Connie would like to know, what is the plans for Fillmore as the green corridor?
For Fillmore Avenue in phase 2, it'll have the rain garden bump outs at the corner. Within the neutral ground, some of the areas will be depressed just so that those provide a little bit of stormwater storage, but there won't be any standing water there. There'll be recreational paths and landscaping, so a lot of improvements along that corridor.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. All right, so Shelley wants to know, will the existing playground equipment at the park on St. Roch and Robert E. Lee be replaced?
Yes, and I know why you're asking that question. I've been to that park and it doesn't feel like that equipment is very safe or up to date. And it's also, when I was out there, it must have been in the summer because it was really, really hot.
Yes.
There's some really nice trees that are just a little bit back in that park, and they've got this really nice canopy. And then the playground equipment is just right in the sun. So yes, that would be a focus for that lot, to have some really nice up-to-date playground equipment.
Thanks for the question. Ms. Ellen wants to know, will cars be able to pass on the streets between Robert E. Lee and Elysian Fields? And Ms. Ellen, I would just like to ask you, are you asking that question post-construction or during the construction process? If you could just unmute yourself and clarify that. Okay, maybe you guys can just field both questions.
Sure, I think maybe her concern is along Elysian Fields, there's 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, and there will remain 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. We wouldn't, there's way too much volume on that street to eliminate a lane there. So no, that absolutely will stay as 2 lanes. And then along Robert E. Lee, I think it changes from 1 lane to 2 lane. But we're looking at that area to really provide the most comprehensive complete streets benefits. And so I believe that along Robert E. Lee, it'll be a continuous 1 lane of traffic and 1 dedicated bike lane. And that's justified by the traffic counts that we have.
I will say thanks to everyone that's submitting questions. These are very thoughtful questions, and I think they are FAQ, so things that everybody wants to know, so keep them coming. But I will also note that we are at 3:52. So we want to be respectful of everyone's time and try to go through as many of these as we possibly can. So, just bear with us in terms of how we answer those questions, and Will and Mary and all of the project team, just be mindful of the amount of time that you spend on answers. So Jade wants to know, there are plenty of trees on the neutral ground of Elysian Fields that have just started to reach a nice size. Are these going to be dug up and replaced with new trees? Also, there are parakeets that live in the palm trees along Robert E. Lee. All my neighbors love these birds.
I think that's a really good question. I think we may have spoken before because I've definitely heard of these issues. So there are really, really nice live oaks along Elysian Fields, and you're correct, those are growing and kind of growing in nicely. We've had an arborist go out and identify all the trees and measure the diameter of them. And for the bigger ones, we definitely wouldn't want to move them. Their survival rate may not be as good. But we've identified some of the smaller ones, and the city's working with getting a company out there to root prune them and then relocate them so that they can be relocated back within the project area, back within Elysian Fields during construction, so that they'll survive, and they should have a very good survival rate. And then the palm trees that are along Robert E. Lee, we've also heard of those, and they're very nice palm trees, and palm trees relocate really well. And so all the palm trees that are along there will just be relocated within the project area, and hopefully the parakeets move back in.
So I do have multiple questions from people that have already asked questions. So to make sure that we get everyone and given everyone an opportunity to ask questions, if you've already asked a question, I may skip your subsequent question and then come back to it just out of respect for time. So Drew wants to know, is there a plan to deal with mosquitoes in the retention areas?
Yes, that's always been a concern of ours, and we wanted to make sure that we addressed that and had a plan for it. And so for the areas that will have water on a dry day, along Robert E. Lee and along Elysian Fields, we didn't want to let that water just sit. And so we have pumps that constantly circulate that water around, and it draws water from the storm system that has just water at that level, and then it circulates it through the streams and the water feature, so that it is never able to sit and allow for mosquitoes to grow, and that's been shown to be a effective measure. And then along other areas, if the water retention areas at the lots on Robert E. Lee are included, those would also have fountains that circulate the water by throwing it up in the air, and that helps with aeration, and it also keeps it from getting stagnant. And so that's something that we've included in the design, because we knew that it wouldn't be a successful project if we created a nuisance.
All right, Alcatel Joy, good afternoon. Thank you for the reading. Alcatel Joy says, very concerned about this project for several reasons. It changes the traffic patterns in our community. It can attract mosquitoes. The bike lanes give the bikers a false self of protection on a street that is the busiest in our neighborhood. I'm concerned about water being in the proximity to neighborhood schools. It creates a detour in pedestrian traffic for those traveling on RTA. There are limited neutral ground crossings, and I noticed that your banners are in the areas that are not affected. I'm sorry. Many people in this neighborhood were not aware that you were still going forward with this project. I was one who attended your meeting a year ago at Alexander School and didn't get any kind of follow-up afterwards. I felt that the product project had been abandoned.
I'm sorry to hear that you have some concerns about the project. I think I'm trying to recall the issues that you touched on. Hopefully I've alleviated some of your concerns on mosquitoes. The bike lanes, I think we have to understand that there are people that would like to use roads for bikes as well. And I think it is important to provide a safe environment for everybody. And so the protected bike lanes will help keep the bikes and cars separated. And hopefully that won't give them a false sense of security. The water areas in the proximity of schools, we're designing all the water areas with safety in mind. And so protective guardrails or buffer areas that are landscaped, ways to get out of the water if you accidentally fall in. And so there's a flat spot towards the bottom. So I'm hoping that we've created a project that you'll really like once it's realized. But we can definitely look at these issues and maybe speak separately. I'd be happy to address them.
So we are currently at the 3:58 mark. I'm happy to continue this a few minutes past time, but again, do want to be respectful of everyone's time that's on the call. So I can go through one more of our chat questions. Mary, how many questions have you gotten via text?
Yeah, hey, Natalie. So some of these questions also have some things in common.
Okay.
There was a question that came in on chat that was, via text, that was about putting our reports online, and then someone in chat said, can the plans be online? The plans and the reports will be online at NOLA.gov/resilience. Same way that you get to the St. Anthony and the other projects. Go to that website, and then the drop-down menu will take you to blue and green corridors. Another question that we had come in on chat was, how will the project reduce urban heat? So these more intensive plantings that we're doing in the neutral ground and the water that's going to be stored tend to absorb less heat during the day. And so they're not putting that heat back out into the neighborhood at night. they also have a cooling effect because the plants are taking in water and then they're evaporating it through the leaves. So you have a localized cooling effect anywhere that you have these types of more intensive plantings. Another question that came in on chat was, how will we address parking due to visitors to the site? And Will, I know you did a survey of the existing parking to see what vacancy there was.
Yes, yes, we've gone through and identified the parking requirements for these type of residential neighborhoods, the number of houses and the anticipated number of cars. And we've tried to balance the need of parking along with other ways to use the space most effectively. And hopefully we've come to a good balance.
I have,
With respect to, sorry, go ahead, Brooke.
I've saved everything that's in the chat function. I've copied into a Word document. Is there a way that we can post our responses to these questions, the ones we're not getting to online?
That's great.
Okay.
So we can send them directly to the person asking the question, and we can post them online as well.
Okay.
But I haven't
And
saved.
now, oh, I'm sorry, Natalie, can you just remind everyone, you know, the slides and the recording of today, you're going to post that on the website as well?
Yes. So the slide deck will be available on the website, NOLA.com/resilience. I'm sorry, NOLA.gov, excuse me, /resilience. So that'll include the slide deck as well as the recording from this meeting. Someone did ask via chat if there will be captions. I don't currently know how to include captions based on this particular platform, but I'll certainly check to see if there's a way that we can include captions. I don't know that there is, but the recording will definitely be available. So one last question, excuse me, from the chat function. And again, we'll make sure that we already have made sure that we're filing all of these questions that are coming through our chat function. Mary is also filing all of those that are coming through our text function. So we'll also have those questions answered for you in writing as well. If you would like, and if you're comfortable, please feel free to share your email address and or phone number to be included in our text campaigns or to get updates on this project. You can send that to the entire group via text function, or you can send it directly to myself or any of the other team members to make sure that we get that information to you, and we appreciate that. One last,
Thanks, Natalie.
yeah. Is there anyone, I just wanted to make sure that if there's anyone calling in that wasn't able to either text or chat, if they had a question that they wanted to ask aloud. All right, we're hearing none. It's 4:02 now. We want to make sure that we keep the schedule. The next meeting that we'll be doing is the resilience design review of the City Park Hazard Mitigation Project. Again, anyone that's on this call is welcome to stay on if you're interested in the 30% design update for that project. I will say that subsequent to that, at around 4:35, we'll be doing another run of the presentation you just saw for the benefit of the Resilience Design Review Committee. And again, if you want to drop off and come back on for that at 4:35, I can make sure that I admit you into the waiting room. If not, then we'll just make sure that we get your questions answered, or you can just drop off the call at this time. All right. So thanks to everybody that has participated that will be dropping off. Again, you're welcome to stay on, but at this point, we'll be transitioning from Blue and Green Corridors 90% update to the 30% resilience design review of the City Park HMGP project.
Thank you, Natalie. And if you could put up the kind of housekeeping screen for the RDRC for our people that newly joined us.
Will do.
For everyone that's just joined the call, we just concluded the 90% community update of Blue and Green Corridors. The Resilience Design Review Committee will begin shortly.
Mary, is this the most current one that you sent me, or did you send me one with an updated intro slide?
I did. If you check your email from probably between 2 and 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
While we're waiting for the screen, I just want to thank everyone for joining us online. The city appreciates you continuing to stay safer at home in phase 2. Please keep your computer and/or phone on mute while the presentation is ongoing. Each presentation and discussion of the committee members will be approximately 30 minutes. Public comment will be requested at the end of the meeting. There are 2 ways to ask questions. You can use the chat feature to chat us a question at any time during the presentation. We'll go through the questions at the end of during the discussion at the end. You can also use a number to text questions to the team, 504-941-0048. These questions will be read aloud by the moderator at the end of the meeting. As Natalie said, we'll be starting with the city park hazard mitigation. Then we'll have presentation by the consulting team, discussion by the committee members. We'll have Blue and Green Corridors, and then Paul Havens Charter School. So if you're interested in specifically one or the other of these projects, just kind of giving you an idea of how long each one's going to take, if you want to kind of tune out and tune back in. Once we have the slides up, we'll do introduction of the Resilience Design Review Committee members and roll call. The Resilience Design Review Committee was created by city policy to ensure consistency with our resilience strategy. If you're not familiar with the city's resilience strategy, it's on our website at nola.gov/resilience. The Resilience Design Review Committee is made up by policy by the Chief Resilience Officer, which at this time is Ramsey Green, our Deputy CAO for Infrastructure, the Office of Equity, the Hazard Mitigation Administrator, Parks and Parkways Department, Public Works, and the Planning Commission. You may also hear comment from other city departments that have interest in this project, which would be Sewage and Water Board is here participating, and then we also have representation from New Orleans Recreation Development Commission. The Resilience Design Review Committee reviews the projects across these categories: location, character, and extent of design, the embodiment of the resilience values from the resilience strategy, equity impacts and outcomes, creative community involvement and engagement, and best maintenance design for resilience performance criteria. So thank you for hanging in with us on our little technical difficulties. We'll get started shortly, have roll call, and quickly move into the presentation. Actually, I guess I could do roll call now. So starting with DPW, Megan, if you could introduce yourself as the representative for DPW.
Yeah, for those who don't know me, I am a stormwater manager for Public Works. I've been involved with the RDRC committee for, I guess, about 2.5, almost 3 years now. I've managed a couple of projects, and I have had the pleasure of commenting on several of the ones that are being presented over time. So that's about all I got, though.
Thank you for saying it's a pleasure. I see that the Mitigation Office has joined us. Austin, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure, Mary. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Austin Feldbaum, and I'm the Hazard Mitigation Program Administrator. Happy to be here.
And Austin, do you want to say anything to the group about your ongoing plan update?
Yes, thank you, Mary, for the prompt and reminder. So we are in the middle of updating our hazard mitigation plan. Last evening, we held our second virtual public meeting to get feedback on our hazard identification and risk assessment and the work that we've done to date. For the remainder of the year, there's going to be a lot going on and a lot of opportunities for folks to be involved and help us put together the plan. We're in the part of the plan where we come up with the strategy for the projects and initiatives that we want to take on over the next couple of years. So this is the fun part. And if you want to get involved, visit ready.nola.gov. You'll see a tab for hazard mitigation. You can sign up to get text or email updates. And that's the best way to find out what's going to be happening in the year. So I hope that y'all join us and participate.
Great, thank you, Austin. And from Parks and Parkways, we have Danny McElmurray. Danny, introduce yourself.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I'm the Chief Landscape Architect with the Department of Parks and Parkways, and I've been involved with this committee actually since it started during the previous administration, actually. You know, one of our big concerns is as we move for more mitigation and stormwater management, how do we integrate that into existing landscapes and how do we ensure that they are maintained? So that's one of our big goals, is to make sure that we can handle what we build.
Absolutely. So for the Planning Commission, I believe we have Travis.
Yeah, hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, this is Travis Martin from City Planning. I'm taking over for Brooke Perry. She recently left for another position. So I'm excited to start working with y'all. I'm a stormwater and transportation planner. I have experience working with stormwater with Sewage and Water Board, Environmental Affairs, and then doing stormwater reviews at CPC. And now I'm one of the members of the transportation team at CPC as well. So I'm excited to work with y'all, and hopefully we can meet in person one day.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have anyone from the Office of Equity on the call? Okay, so moving on from our members by policy, I know that we have representatives from other city departments. I saw several people from NORD-C. If you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hey, this is Edgar Alexis. This is Edgar Alexis, Chief Operating Officer. How's everybody doing?
Great, thank you so much. We also have some people from Sewage and Water Board. If you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Cameron. Sorry I have my mask on because I'm in my office and I share office with other people. I actually work for Sewage and Water Board, Environmental Affairs, Compliance. I'm a landscape architect and an environmental planner. I've been kind of commenting on these projects for the last year and a half. And obviously as a landscape architect, I have a passion about these projects. So I'm glad to be able to serve.
And Cameron, we're going to be seeing you again because you're going to introduce the team for Paul Havens.
Definitely, yes.
Kind of continuing to move out, we're so honored today to have several of our federal teammates on the call. If you could unmute and introduce yourselves. And I also saw Chris Olby from GOSEP. Chris, if you'd want to go first.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. This is Christopher Olby. I'm the Hazard Mitigation State Applicant Liaison for the City of New Orleans with GOSEP.
Good afternoon,
Thank you,
everyone.
Chris.
Good afternoon. My name is Silu Baring, and I am the Hazard Mitigation Grants Specialist assigned to work with CNO on all of our projects. Very excited to be on the call and to see the progress made thus far.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else from the state, federal government, or City of New Orleans who would like to announce themselves before we begin? Great. Hearing none and having the members of the RDRC
Mary,
represented.
I just want to acknowledge that members of our environmental team from FEMA are also on the call.
Oh, they being shy? That's fine. That's fine. Okay, well, let's get started with City Park hazard mitigation. So the lead for this is Batcher, and Bob Mora is going to be presenting. He has a whole team with him. So Bob, I'm going to let you introduce your team.
Okay, great. Mary, I was going to mention too, I think Meg Adams with City Park is on the call, I'm pretty sure. So that's one of our other government representatives, so to speak.
I'm here. Thank you all for joining the call. I'm anxious to hear what everybody has to say about it.
I wasn't sure, did you want me to share my screen and do the presentation that way, if that's easier, or?
So yeah, I think Natalie's going to share her screen. If you could just tell her when you want to advance the slide. Is that correct, Natalie?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes. So I'm about to pull up your presentation right now, Bob.
Okay, great. But
while she's doing that,
as I was going to say,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm Bob Mora with Batcher, and we're working on the City Park Hazard Mitigation Project. So this first slide lists all of our team members. We have a pretty robust team. Wagner Ball, Rami and David Wagner are both on the call. Rami's going to speak to some of these slides. Biohabitats is a company that's based out of Maryland, and they have a lot of expertise in nature-based solutions for water management and for infrastructure in general. Eustace Engineering, geotechnical engineer on the project. Greenpoint Engineering is a local civil engineering firm. Rostan Solutions is a firm that is assisting us with the BCA. And Wingate Engineers is another local civil engineering firm, a small firm, a new firm that we have as a protege company on the team to kind of help them build some capacity. So we have more local firms able to work on these projects. What we're going to talk about today is the bulk of the time is going to be this project overview. And also we're going to touch on stakeholder meetings, water quality of the lagoon system in City Park, groundwater and geotechnical engineering. This particular condition we'll call the edge condition, like the edge of the lagoons where we have some erosion issues and some compromised trees. And then we're going to talk about the overall cost estimate for the project and where we are with that. So the project overview. So this project is unique in that it's taking place in City Park, it's a project that we're doing with the city of New Orleans, but we're also working with City Park. We're used to working with stakeholders, but this is kind of a higher level of like an interested stakeholder. Obviously, this is their property. They're dealing with the park on a daily basis. But to describe the project in a very general sense is we are aiming to take a significant amount of stormwater that lands in Lake Vista north of City Park. It currently does not go into City Park. We're going to take it into City Park to alleviate localized flooding in Lakeview and the adjacent neighborhood. We're also looking to improve the ecosystem within City Park and add some recreational amenities within the park. So what you're looking at here is what we would call like the watershed or the drainage basin for the project. And so you can see at the bottom right, you see Lake Vista, you see City Park. There's 2 pump stations within this drainage basin, and you see the light blue is sort of an indication of that 10-year storm event, like where you see flooding. So the interesting thing to note on this slide is in Lake Vista, you don't see any of that blue. Like there's no flooding. There's no flooding issue in Lake Vista. So this is a little bit of the historical context of City Park, and historical going back 5,000 years in the first slide, and showing, so this tells us what's happening below the Earth's surface. You know, 5,000 years ago, there was what's known today as the Pine Island Trend. It was a band of pine trees and a barrier island that exists at varying depths across City Park now, but it's a layer of soil that's sandy and does present opportunities for more infiltration than you would normally have within New Orleans. The next one is 1800s of sort of showing basically the park was a cypress swamp. Bayou St. John was intact, and it was a waterway that led into the city. In the 1930s, a master plan was developed for City Park. If you look closely, you'll see that it's a little different than what it does in fact exist today, but it's you know, very much the general concept is there. And then the last view is the present condition of the park. So this is a great slide as well. It's showing, this is cutting a section basically from City Park Avenue all the way to the lake. And the view you see in the middle is showing the elevation difference. And so you can really demonstrates as you get to the right side, you see that Lake Vista is just much higher ground than City Park. And you also see that that north section of City Park, where one of the golf courses is very low relative to everything, but particularly Lake Vista right to the north. And this slide is a similar concept, but it's cutting sections in the opposite direction, west to east. So you're looking at City Park, Bayou St. John's on the right, Orleans Avenue, Outfall Canal on the left. And you're seeing the same kind of a situation where there's sort of a ridge, like Bayou St. John is a ridge. Something that's important to note is that is the edge of this, that's the edge of this drainage basin, that there's no hydraulic connection further east. So that, I guess another way to think about it is, if the water's going down a hill, Lake Vista is essentially the top of the hill. Another interesting thing to note is, I'm sure many of us are familiar with the hill in City Park that's, you know, I think referred to as Monkey Hill. In this slide, it's saying Laborde Mountain, as we call the mountain in New Orleans. But that I'm pretty sure that's the highest point in the city, and so you really do see it showing up in that section. You just at plus 26 feet. And this is another view of this drainage basin, sort of an isometric view. And what you're seeing again is, I guess to describe, try to stay on this one for a second and give an understanding of what's happening hydraulically. Within City Park, north of I-610, you have water comes into the lagoon system. There's a connection at Bayou St. John that allows water from Bayou St. John into the park, which is very critical It's not very sophisticated necessarily, but it's very important for the water quality because it's that water that's coming in has some salt in it, some salinity, and that really does help balance out the water quality. It's regulated with a very sophisticated piece of plywood and some sandbags to shut it off if it needs to be shut off at different times. But that's where water comes in. Water also comes in when it rains, and then that's it. And then water flows out at 610. There's a weir that's recently been renovated, and there's 2 weirs up by Robert E. Lee where if the lagoon gets to a certain level, it overflows that weir into, some of it goes to pump station 7 if it's going to the south, and that tends to happen on a regular basis. It's kind of consistently, and then when it rains a bunch, you get some water also going out to the north, which goes into a box culvert that heads to the west to pump station 12, which is right by Russell's Marina Grill, the Robert's grocery store over on that side of town. This is an interesting piece of history, I suppose. This is a siphon, what's known as a siphon that's going underneath the Orleans Avenue Canal. And this is a situation where the box, you see it in the top where you cut the section where the box sort of dips down and then dips back up, but it's still at a lower elevation. So when we get a significant rain event, I guess like an August flood, we can call like a 10-year storm, enough water gets in this box that pushes the water through. You can see in this one photo, sort of at the bottom, second from the left, there's a smaller pipe. So when we have a normal rain event, a more normal rain event in New Orleans, the water crosses in that 21-inch pipe that's somewhat in a regular manner. But when we get a significant rain event, the water pushes over the wing walls and pushes through. Pushes its way underneath the entire canal. And the pictures to the right at the bottom are some present day. The top right is a picture of the engineer that designed it inside of the box, I think in the 1940s.
Hey, Bob, can I jump in for a second? This is Rami at Wagner Ball. The important thing to note here is, as well, is that all
next slide, please, I think. I hear something. I don't know if somebody was speaking there, but.
Bob, Rami was trying to talk, but he's a little bit muted.
Rami, maybe you need to increase the volume on your phone. We can hear you, but you're a little low.
Okay, I'll try calling back in. Hang on. So go ahead with the slides.
We can hear you much better now. Can everyone else hear Rami?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I just wanted to also add a really important note here that all of Lake Vista's water is going into that Robert E. Lee canal, and then goes under the Orleans Canal over to Lakeview. So that's another thing that we're really trying to illustrate here, that really all that drainage is going to another neighborhood, which is kind of strange.
And so this is another pump station 7 that many of us have probably seen. This is draining a large portion of Mid-City and Lakeview. This is the pump station right to the south of 610. You would see it if you're driving down Marconi. It drains a very large basin, and it's like a large portion of Lakeview routes back to this pump station. On most normal rain events, City Park outfalls to this pump station in 2 different box culverts. One of them is north of that rail line, one is south of the rail line, and then that water is pumped out towards the lake. And so here's some existing conditions, and just to orient everybody here, this is facing south. You're basically kind of by Lake Vista, but on the Marconi side, and you're facing south. If you look to the left side of the sheet, you sort of see the little eyeball and the projection showing you what you're looking at. And the next slide will show some of the improvements that we're looking at making. But this is the existing condition. The water comes from Lake Vista to that box. The water comes out of the lagoons, overflows, and goes into the box, which goes towards pump station 12. And so if you flip to the next slide, you'll start to see some of the improvements that we're suggesting with the project, where instead of the water going into the box, it's going to go into City Park. And what we're trying to indicate with these areas where you see more of the green line is an indication that we're talking about temporarily storing water in those areas before it gets into the areas with the blue lines that are the lagoon or the box culvert. But some of those areas that'll stay more wet on a regular basis. Here's a bird's eye view of the same area. If you look on the left side, it's kind of showing you what you were looking at. This is Lake Vista. If I'm sure many of us are familiar with Lake Vista. But every one of these streets has drainage infrastructure that's tying into the box on Robert E. Lee, or it's tying into a box on Marconi, which ties into the box on Robert E. Lee. And so what we've been looking at is intercepting some of that drainage through gravity, slowing it down and routing it into the park. Some of it's routing directly across Robert E. Lee. Some of it's routing into this green space on the left side of the page on Marconi, north of Robert E. Lee. That's property that's owned by City Park, and that we've spoken with the levee board about the proximity to the canal and things of that nature. But that is a really large area that primarily serves as a grass field right now. We're also looking at routing water into the neutral ground on Robert E. Lee. The other presentation that is happening later that happened a little earlier on blue-green corridors, we were sort of mimicking some of the things that we saw in that project on Robert E. Lee, trying to mirror that a little bit down on this end. This is as we get further into the park, going south. Again, you see the water routing into a new area that's labeled as a constructed wetland. That's an area that won't stay wet all the time. It won't be a lagoon. It'll be an area that when you kind of envision right now, if you drive down Robert E. Lee after a hard rain, you see this puddle of water, and you kind of go from 2 lanes to 1 lane of traffic. In the most basic sense, we want to put 1 lane that's underwater. We want to put that puddle of water right there in that area, so it's out of the street. But then it also has an opportunity to get filtered by plants and things like that instead of just putting it directly into the lagoon system. You see some other improvements that we're suggesting of just reconfiguring the lagoon of Marconi a little bit, building some shelf areas. The areas you see that are light green are suggested areas where the water, when we get to a high stage water, that level that's underwater. In a normal case, it's land, and so those could be some interesting planted areas. The next slide is a cross section. If you're looking at the bottom left side, you're seeing the 2 driving lanes on Robert E. Lee. You're seeing this suggested bioswale along the side of Robert E. Lee. Then there's a little walking path, bike path, and so then we get to this lower area that's a planted area where water can sit temporarily and then filter into the City Park lagoon system over time, 24 hours, 8 hours, whatever we design it to do. There's also the opportunity that water could filter back into the box over a longer period of time. Again, and all of that is with that intention of taking that pressure from the top of the hill off of the box in Lakeview, so that area can drain a little more freely. And I think this is the slide that our team member Rami is going to speak for a little bit on some of these next slides.
Yeah, hey, can you all hear me okay? I tried to call in, but I couldn't speak. This is something in our research of the park that we were intrigued by, this space along Marconi that is called Doctor's Grove. And all of the trees in there were planted in memory of doctors. And we thought it was timely and pretty powerful. And we were inspired by the rod of Caduceus, which is a symbol of the medical corps of the military. and has now become kind of a symbol of doctors. There's also the rod of Asclepius, which is another symbol of medicine. And we were thinking it'd be really cool to develop a boardwalk and more plantings and sort of a winding water course through this zone that could both help filter stormwater, create more space for stormwater, but then also an opportunity to plant even more trees in memory of the medical workers that are dealing with COVID. And so we just see this as a great opportunity site. Next slide. As you move south in the park, these shelves that Bob was talking about where we can create more water capacity as well as some better habitat zones. I'll describe that a little more on the next slide, but also taking out some of the constrictions. There's a lot of places where the lake system is bound up by old pathways or golf course kind of crossings, very small pipes in some conditions. And so that would really help with water quality and flow. And also the ability to maybe circumnavigate some of this water. Next slide. This is showing a section through, kind of a typical section through the lagoons where we're taking the existing condition where it's very shallow in some areas. In some places, it's only a couple of inches deep, and taking out the silt, finding a way to put that into the park because it is good soil, and then creating these shelves that allow for more space when it floods. But also an opportunity for habitat and new plantings. And this would be great for fish and other animals. And deepening the lagoons will also help with water quality tremendously. Next slide. So this is a view from the south looking north, just about 610. And you can see how all of that lake system, the lagoon system, flows into the weir next to Grodat. Next slide. And as you start to carefully, working with the trees, of course, and where we have room, kind of looking at those banks to create more capacity and better habitat alongside. Next slide. So down in this area near 610, right, you can see some of the opportunities that have been explored in the Wisner Track Master Plan for more storage capacity and more water, but then also the opportunity at the weir itself. It's a great place to create a maintenance facility for getting into the water, and that maintenance facility might also be for recreation as well. Next slide. This is a close-up of that, where there's this existing weir that clearly people are using it now as a great fishing spot, but wouldn't it be great if that could be formalized a little better so it's easier to maintain the weir, but then also as an opportunity for people to get out closer to the water. It's also a great spot. There's a parking lot that we could maybe put a boat launch in that location. The next slide shows south of 610. And this is an area that isn't necessarily impacting the water coming from Lakeview or Lake Vista, but it is how all of City Park does drain to this zone here. So near the Children's Museum, we see in the next slide an opportunity for north of the Children's Museum, some opportunity there to do some storage. And here's a plan view of that, where there's a huge change in elevation from the Children's Museum lake to the pump station. So there's a lot of opportunity for storage as well as sort of a new identity of water in this kind of underutilized part of the park. Next slide. And Bob, I think you'll pick it up here.
All right, great. So just wanted to talk a little bit about stakeholder meetings. This is a unique location where a lot of stakeholders are converging in the same area. So we've taken the opportunity to reach out to a number of stakeholders that have a vested interest in this project. And just to quickly going down that list, City Park and the City of New Orleans, we're meeting with on a regular basis, but we've also met with the City Park Golf Course, which is kind of a separate entity or an entity in its own little world within City Park. We've met with the Flood Protection Authority. We've met with the Non-Flood Asset Management Authority, the Sewage and Water Board, and the Department of Public Works and their consultants on a couple of different recovery road projects. And so by doing that, we've identified some really good opportunities to collaborate with those projects. The recovery road projects are all at a point where there is some flexibility. Generally speaking, they were going to work with our project regardless, but there's, we were able to meet early enough where we can kind of optimize those connection points and really set each other up to leverage their funding and our funding, and we're not like ripping something out that they put in. So that was a really exciting opportunity there. The City Park Golf Course, we identified some really surprising opportunities where, we're really kind of surprised to hear that they were very interested in planted areas, and actually pointed out that those areas are less money for them to maintain than grass. If it's grass that's sort of outside of a fairway, to just sort of fertilize and cut that grass is very expensive, and for them to mulch and weed is much more cost effective. The Flood Authority, we're really happy to hear from them that they generally don't have any immediate opposition to this idea of us holding water in somewhat of proximity to their levee by that canal. We talked about some minimum distances. We also talked about the opportunity to submit plans to them for approval a little bit ahead of our schedule to get that section a little more finalized so they can review it and approve it, so we don't get into that normal high river stage, because they get a little bit busy at the Corps as far as reviewing plans. So we were going to try to get those plans reviewed during the fall. The Sewage and Water Board, we met with them, and they identified a project for us that we didn't think had any drainage in it. So they facilitated a meeting with that consultant and the PM. From a water quality standpoint, this is something that has been expressed as a concern from the beginning of the project. There's a lot of text on this slide. We wanted to include it for people's information. I'm not going to read it all, but I did want to say that we have a team member, one of our employees at Batcher, that's a biologist that knows so much about the lagoon system within City Park specifically. And so he's been really leading the charge on this, but the basic premise of what we're doing is we want to show that we're actually improving the water quality within the park, as opposed to the narrative that we're damaging it with the runoff water. So currently we're getting baseline information, doing a lot of water quality tests in the park, and that'll allow us, and we'll continue doing that during construction, post-construction, to demonstrate that the project is not having a negative effect. The next slide shows some of that testing taking place. This is a biologist that's working with us, Ashley, and this is a young woman, Alexis, who works with one of our sub-consultants, Wingate Engineers. She's an engineering student at UNO, and so they've been collecting these samples, getting us baseline of what is currently existing in the park. Another important piece to this is groundwater and geotechnical engineering. We have Eustace Engineering has begun their work. They've set up 3 piezometers. I think we got those set up maybe 2 months ago. So we started collecting data during the rain events. We see exactly what's happening with the groundwater. We can sort of begin to correlate that with the lagoon levels. One option that we're interested in is if there is an opportunity to lower the water level in the lagoon, and what are the reasonable constraints around that. We don't quite have a hard answer on that yet. They are going to set up a lot more piezometers as we move forward here. The next few slides are on the edge conditions. This is again that edge of the lagoon where you walk around City Park, you see some issues. And so we want to correct a lot of those with this project. The idea of introducing more water during rain events could damage that even more. So this is a project in Baton Rouge. The next slide is Children's Museum, which our sub-consultant Biohabitats worked on, as well as a demonstration project for another shoreline restoration within City Park. And so the last thing I think that we wanted to talk about is the cost estimate and just sort of how we're approaching that. What we started doing is just costing all the items that we think are absolutely necessary to get water into City Park. We still don't have a full understanding of the hydrology. So what we're basically doing is holding some budget, knowing that we're going to need some additional things as far as potentially a small pump station, potentially just some interventions as this large amount of water goes into the park at that entry point. We want to make something that's not a continual maintenance issue. But this breaks down the budget. You'll see the vast majority of the cost is for excavation. The lagoon system is incredibly shallow in areas. And so we really need to get a good bit of excavation going to improve water quality and water circulation. And that, I think, is the last slide.
Thanks, Bob. So at this time, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And Mary, do you want to open up comments from the committee first and then public comment? Because I'm looking at the time, we are at 4:47 and we were planning to start the 90% for Blue and Green Corridor design review at 4:35. So just wanted to hear from the project team, what do we think our best use of time will be? I think it's important, obviously, to get the committee's feedback first. And then time permitting, we can get maybe 2 or 3 questions and then answer the rest from public at a later date in writing. I think you're on mute, Mary. Don't look to be on mute, but can't hear you.
I think you have to unmute her, Natalie.
It doesn't even look like, based on, doesn't look like she's on mute. Let's see. She's not muted on my end, so.
I think she called in on her phone, 858-3055.
Yeah, let's see. Go down the list. Oh, there she is. Okay. Mary, can you?
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah, Natalie, our procedure for RDRC is we'll do presentations and comments by the committee, and then we'll do public comment at the end. So since we're all on phones, I'm going to ask the members of the committee to unmute themselves and provide their comments and any questions. I'm going to start with Megan from DPW.
Yes, so first of all, great job so far on this project, guys. I'm very excited to see this type of project start to really come to fruition and utilize the few large green spaces that we do have. I know, Bob, you said that you guys are kind of coordinating with the JIR projects within the Lake Vista area. Are there any great infrastructure improvements that are planned to kind of bridge the gap between the two projects?
There would be potentially just a connection across the street. So the coordination has been more about, just where, like, them leaving us a manhole at the end, so it's easier on our plans to call out tie into this manhole versus, putting one 100 feet further down the street or something. And that type of coordination of giving us like a good point to tie into, and I suppose that would be a great infrastructure improvement would be running the pipe across Robert E. Lee to get that water into the park.
What's the water surface elevation in the Robert E. Lee box? Do you guys know?
It is, it's like I guess at what point in time on a normal?
In a dry condition, hasn't rained in a while. What is do we know what the water surface elevation is?
It is about, like, The lagoon is at -8.5, and it's about 5 or 6 feet lower. So it's like -13. And there's maybe like an inch or two of water that flows in it on a regular basis. Any given day, if you opened it, if it hadn't rained for a month, you'd see about an inch of water flowing in it at elevation -13.
Okay. And then the last one I have is, I know you mentioned you guys have some piezometers that you're kind of monitoring for the groundwater level. I know some areas along the Marconi side, the groundwater seems to be relatively high. Do you have piezometers in that location, or where exactly are they located?
We can send you the info. Right now, we basically have one north of Robert E. Lee, west of Marconi. They're all kind of three, basically at that intersection.
Okay. Okay. And I think Sewage and Water Board may be doing some work with that. I don't know if that's the project you were mentioning, but I've seen them out there maybe trying to do some mitigation measures because of that groundwater. I think so.
I think that was the water main. You're talking about on Marconi?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's the water main. That was, because we had a meeting with Kyle and we mentioned it, and so I think that's like a 50-inch water main right there. And so
yeah, that's what it is then.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's maybe turning into a wetland, but I don't think it's there yet. But it was definitely staying wet right there on Marconi.
Okay. I think that's all that I have. I can keep working with you guys on the coordination with the JIR efforts and just make sure that there's constant communication there.
Yeah, one thing.
30% though, I don't have a whole lot to say.
One thing you will be interested in, Megan, is we've been meeting with a company and we're going to install some measuring devices in the boxes to measure the flow.
Perfect.
Continuously, but then also the water height. So we'll have that, we'll start getting that data during a storm. So just something to compare to the model and just world data on water depth and flow. So that's really interested to start to get that installed.
Yeah, once you guys get that installed, I'd be very interested to see how it's producing some of that data. But otherwise, that's all I have for the moment.
We're confident it won't rain for like as soon as we install it. I'm sure.
Great, thank you, Megan.
Great job,
next,
guys.
could we hear from hazard mitigation? Austin?
Yeah. Thanks, Mary, and thanks, Bob and Remy, for the presentation. This is a great project. It's great to see it moving forward. It makes a lot of sense to use the green spaces and the parks and other public areas in the city for multiple different purposes, stormwater, et cetera, that we want to build into our landscape. So just a plug for this project. I have a couple of questions about, we talked a little bit about sort of drawdown and control of the water levels in the park. Bob, I think you kind of discussed a couple of different options in terms of pumps and weirs and different control methods. I would just love to, I know we're early in the project development. I'd love to hear a little bit more about some alternatives or different, fundamentally, different scenarios. I think we need to think about once things are built, once mosquito questions that get asked about mosquitoes, questions get asked about swamp rot. I mean, if you've ever spent a lot of time in a wetland, they're not always charming, as useful and great, as they might be for a lot of our purposes. So I think we just need to think about, it's a park, it's a public gathering place. And if we have control over the water, then the implication is we're going to tinker with it. So we need to kind of think through what those scenarios are and build that into the project documentation.
So Austin, before you
Mary.
move on, Austin, Mark, if you could unmute yourself and share with Austin how we're controlling mosquitoes, because it's something that we haven't done on a city project before. It's City Parks method. Well, Mark is a biologist that works. There you go. Thanks, Mark.
Hey, thanks, Mary. Yeah, I'm a fisheries biologist. I'm going to work with the water quality, water sampling. We also have on our team Tulane, who's working with the city mosquito control board directly on the Delhi project, and we work on the city park project as well. In general, suburbs usually have more mosquito problems than wetlands because they have healthy fish populations. So we feel that keeping the water quality healthy is going to actually help the mosquito situation versus hurt it. But we're very conscious of that, and we're going to be monitoring throughout the whole project and integrate those things.
And City Park is very successfully using fish right now in its other lagoons, correct?
Yeah, it's one of the best urban fisheries in the country, and we're going to maintain and build on that. It's going to be better than before.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Austin, you want to continue?
Yeah, thanks, Mary, and thanks, Mark. I mean, those are good points, and I think that in general, the idea of increasing circulation throughout the park is obviously it's going to improve water quality. I'd love to see some kind of rough estimates of, I don't know, residence time or what that's really going to look like. I have a question for Bob and the team. It kind of seems like when we talk about the different components of the project and what's critical, I didn't hear a lot of discussion of like different alternatives in terms of different scenarios and combinations of features and options that result in different amounts of flood mitigation, right? So I know that we'll get there down the road when we get to refining the project and refining the elements, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing some more detail on that. I think those are my only comments tonight. This is great work, and thank you guys for pushing this forward.
Thank you.
Great, if we could hear from Parks and Parkways.
Hey, yeah, this is Danny. I had a few concerns. I was looking at the drawings. I do want to say I appreciate the presentation part of it. Graphically, I think it's very helpful to understand at least the design or the concept that you're working from. Specifically, in terms of like the Robert E. Lee Boulevard neutral ground, I was a little surprised by it, to be honest. And have y'all taken into account the cost of relocating those 6 electrical substations and the loss of those mature evergreen trees as an offset for how much storage you would actually get that you couldn't otherwise put into City Park somewhere in City Park that would handle that same amount of storage? It seems like a very little bit of storage for a very large cost in terms of rainwater absorption by the trees, but also just in the sheer moving that physical utility infrastructure.
Right. And just as a point of clarity, that neutral ground we're seeing more is an area of conveyance more so than storage. And it's because if you look at when you get to a certain point to the east, you can't just cross Robert E. Lee because it's no longer a city park. It's like that USDA building or whatever. And so this was really more of a mechanism of conveyance. So that it could become pipes. It could, that could be routed not through the neutral ground. One meeting that we were unable to have just yet was going to be with Entergy Electric. And what I've noticed throughout those neighborhoods where the electric's underground, and not to speak on their behalf, but they've replaced transformers in a lot of those neighborhoods, and what they've done is elevated them, and they're much smaller than what they used to be. And so this was, maybe wishful thinking that these get elevated and smaller, and then as far as the trees, we would just need to survey that area, but we were aware that there's trees there. But again, it wasn't going to be a storage area, more of like get the water halfway across the street, bring it down a couple of blocks, and then get it on the rest of the way across. So if it was going to be super costly, we would probably do it in a different manner.
Yeah, I think that's something y'all really need to focus on as you move forward, is to really look at, is this really a good return on investment? Because from our perspective, it's not. And then looking at the expanded lagoon, I mean, you're making a bigger lagoon in the Wisner Track area. there are some fingers in there and it's not fully connected everywhere, which concerns me. We just dealt with the same problem for the Brechtel lagoons, and we had to do a lot of excavation and digging out, kind of similar to what you're proposing to do. And so we still have problems with invasive species because we don't have the water flow that we need, and we've got some aeration going on now, but I see some of the same kind of fingers that create that same problem that we had. And so without making sure that you have more connections, I think you really need to look at, are you going to create some areas where you do end up having stagnant water because the water flow is not moving around enough? And that's a kind of an engineering thing, just to move forward. Make sure you're modeling that. And then a more broad kind of comment. So far, I think you're finding solutions that work on an engineering level, but they don't necessarily work as a landscape architecture level, and as a personal experience level. City Park was designed by landscape architects to be a true outdoor experience, not just an engineered solution. And I encourage you to really follow that kind of framework of what is the design experience going to be versus here's just an answer of we're going to store this much water and we're going to move this much water. There's existing paths that are going to be interrupted. There's bridges. You're creating another experience. And is that the same experience that you want people to have, or is it just going to be moving water through? So I really encourage y'all to kind of broaden that design perspective, because I'm not sure who all of the design team is in terms of landscape architects, but I didn't really see a lot going that way. You don't have any firms listed as that, which worries me, to be frank.
Yeah, no, I appreciate those comments, Danny, and yeah, and I would admit that that's where we are at the 30%. It is hazard mitigation, so it was sort of the critical part was figuring out how do we get this water across the street? Is it enough water? Right. But we fully intend to, to look at the project with the lens that you're describing. That was just somewhat of the.
Yeah, I mean, it's really to encourage you to move to that point as you move forward. It really needs to be, what's the experience now? Because the park is for people. It's not just for water.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the stuff in the Wisner tract, the park does have a master plan. And so, so it's based on that master plan, some of what we're showing and trying to work within that master plan that the park had in place. But yeah, we definitely, we have landscape architecture on the team, but admittedly they haven't been as involved as they will be later on in the project.
I'm just letting you know, it's apparent that they aren't. So
yeah.
Okay.
We will.
Thanks.
Thank you, Danny. Next, we're going to move on to Travis with City Planning Commission.
Hey guys, thanks for your work once again. This is a really exciting project, and I know a real important step to further and come closer to achieving the goals of the urban water plan that I know everyone's been working on so hard. I know it's in the very beginning phases. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Danny said and more of the experience part of the project, and really want to hope that to see a ton of educational signage, interactive features. The public will be able to get engaged with the project and really learn about what's going on and the importance of everything. And yeah, like educational pathways and walks kind of guiding people through the project and really using it as a tool to educate people as well, visitors to the park and whatnot. I know it's early, and thank you all for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. So having covered the members of the committee, I'd like to move on to other city departments, starting with Nordsee. Does Nordsee have any comments? Moving on, I'd like to acknowledge Sewage and Water Board. Does Sewage and Water Board have any comments?
This is Cameron. If Brian's on the call and he's muted, he's on this position, so I haven't heard anything, so I don't think he has any comments. Thanks, Mary, for including us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Moving out, does GOSEP have any comments?
No, Mary, not at this time. I don't have any comments. I would just like to say that this is a very exciting project, and being a graduate of a forestry college and also working as an environmental scientist and now working in hazard mitigation, this project is a good opportunity to see all those things working together, and it's very exciting.
Great. I heard you say site visit. CELU and our other federal partners, would any of you like to make any comments?
This is CELU. I would just like to say that it looks like a really great project, and as a local New Orleanian, I'm pleased with all the mitigation covered and all the green mitigation. Just looking forward to seeing it develop and getting the phase 1 plans in our hot little hands for review.
Great. Thank you, CELU. And I just want to reiterate that any pass will be maintenance pass, and everything will be tied to stormwater. So I'd like to open up the floor to a motion from one of the committee members to approve this project for moving to the 60% phase, assuming that all comments that were brought up here tonight are addressed in the ongoing design. Can I get a committee member to make that motion?
Yeah,
I've got all night.
I'll motion to move this forward to the next phase of design.
Wonderful. Can I get a second?
Second, city planning.
Thank you. Okay, this concludes City Park. We will now move on to blue and green corridors while Natalie is pulling those slides up. So for the residents that have called in, you know, you're kind of getting a sense of the level of detail and how seriously city staff take these projects. You're also going to see kind of a buffet of funding options. The project that you just saw is funded by FEMA, and those costs only reimburse us for things that are directly to stormwater management. Hence my little joke about maintenance pass. Now this next project is funded by HUD, and they are allowing us to address some things that deal with the total resilience of the community to disasters. So the team presenting for blue and green will be Will Bain from Stantec, and Will, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, great. Natalie, by any chance, do you have the RDRC presentation that I sent over? I see that you have the community meeting. I'm not sure if you have the other presentation. Yep.
Sorry, she's taking a minute to come up.
While we're waiting for that, Will, do you want to introduce the other members of your design team, please?
Sure. Well, I'll be giving this presentation. But so I'm Will Bain. I'm the project manager for Blue and Green Corridors for Stantec Consulting. Bernadette Callahan is also on the call, as well as Brooke Morris with Priscilla, and Sheila with FedGeek. Some other sub-consultants we have on our team are MSMM, ILSI, Canal. Trying to remember them all right now, but we've got a really good team that cover a lot of bases. And Natalie, I have the presentation if I'm able to share my screen, but I'm not sure if that's available.
Sorry, yeah, well, you can go ahead and share your screen. I'll make your screen shareable because it's not coming up for me on my end. Let's see.
It says it's disabled for participant.
Yeah, I just checked it now to be able to share it now.
Sorry, let me see if I can change it to presenting mode.
Just click
okay,
on.
Great.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so much for allowing me to have this time today. I know that everybody's busy. So as I mentioned, I'm Will Bain with Stantec, presenting the Blue and Green Corridor Stormwater Resilience Project. This project is at the 90% design. I'm very happy about that because I feel like we're almost there. I feel like it's within sight. This project has feels like it has a long history. It was originally envisioned by the city in 2013. We were brought on in 2018 through the RFP process. And as soon as we were brought on the project, we knew that one of the first things we needed to do was engage the residents to find out what their concerns were, what opportunities they saw for the project, make sure we were addressing everything that they needed, and make sure that they felt involved with the project and felt like they were able to shape it. So that's always been a big focus for how we've approached this. We've had a lot of good community meetings. Initially, we had a leadership forum with community leaders to really hear them out, as they would be the best to know the issues that affect the community, know the best stakeholders to talk to. And so we started there, and we had an open house to not tell the residents what project we wanted to build. It was to ask them what project they wanted in their neighborhood. And so we came with maps that didn't have anything on it, just aerial views of the streets. We asked for everybody to give their feedback so that we could use that information to help shape the project. We've also had outreach at Gentilly Fest, face-to-face meetings, door-to-door outreach, some other alternatives that we've gone to since the pandemic has started. So providing a good outreach strategy has always been very important. This is a graphic that shows some of the steps that we've taken. So that top left image is one of the maps, and we didn't show curb bump outs or storage or anything in there. We just asked people to put red stickers where they found a problem, or green stickers where they thought there was an opportunity, to write notes saying, I know that there's flooding at this catch basin, or there's very nice trees here, any kind of comment that they had. And we took that information and developed a project strategy, a plan. And then once we had that concept done, we started putting things down to paper. And so we started laying out where we would have recreational trails or exercise equipment or playgrounds. And we put that in a format that the residents would be able to see and understand, example pictures, something that was easier to consume. And then we went back and we had a check-in meeting, an open house, to make sure that they agreed with what we heard, make sure that the project we were proposing, the route we were going down, is what they would want in their neighborhood. And then we took the feedback we heard from that meeting and then adjusted the design some more. And that's how we've gotten to the 90% plans that are the almost complete plans that'll be given to a contractor so that they will be able to go out and build it. This is just one of the examples of some of the information that we heard during our public engagement. There's a word cloud showing frequently heard words, safety, bike path, maintenance, flooding, seating. Then we also had surveys where people could either vote with chips or online or through a paper survey about things that were a concern for them or things that they wanted to be included in the project. Then we had our next phase of public engagement all set and ready to go, and then social distancing happened, and so we had to kind of think on our feet. And so since large gatherings really just aren't available, some of the other solutions that we've come up with is a direct mailing campaign to residents within the area with mailers customized to where they live. So they'll see portions of the project that's closest to their home. Informative signage that we've put out in neutral ground showing renderings of what the project will look like. Let everybody know that the project's coming soon. Adding information on how they can find more information, which website to go to, a survey they can fill out. And we've put together educational activity books for kids to complete so they have something to do, and it's a way to connect with them on a level that they would understand. So what I'm presenting today is the Blue and Green Corridors Phase 1, which is Elysian Fields Avenue and Robert E. Lee Boulevard. The two of these connect together. I just rotated them because it's hard to fit on one slide. This project includes stormwater storage inside the neutral ground for both these streets. Along Robert E. Lee, in between St. Anthony and St. Roch, we've got a stream that we've created by pumping up water, and then it'll flow down through some nice riffles, and it goes back and forth, and it'll kind of meander, and it'll enter into Elysian Fields. And so we've created a system that circulates water, so to help provide water quality, to aerate it, to keep nuisances away. And then along both these roadways, we've got walking paths with enhanced landscaping, so it's a nice, pleasant walk. Along Robert E. Lee, we've got curb bump outs to help improve water quality, help with some of the stormwater storage. And then we've scattered playgrounds and adult fitness equipment throughout to give people places to have active fitness as they're going out. Give them something to do while they're out walking, or a place to go exercise. This project has some goals that we have to make sure that we're addressing, and that's part of the NDR funding. These are some of the measurables that we really need to meet to make for a successful project. And so for the water goals, we need to make sure that we're addressing flooding, and that is probably one of the first and foremost aspects of the project. For public health goals, we want to provide access to high quality parks, places where people will go and have active recreation. For heat goals, we want to make sure we're creating shade. We want to make sure that we're making best efforts to reduce daytime and nighttime ambient temperatures, because that'll lead to healthier outcomes. Cultural goals, to create community destinations and neighborhood gathering points, places where they can go meet their neighbors. And then for economic goals, we have to make sure that this project shows more benefits than costs. And so it'll pay for itself over time, where you pay for it with the initial construction costs and then maintenance costs and replacement costs. And those are outweighed by reduction in flood damages, by property value increases, by reduction in subsidence, recreational and educational benefits. to describe the existing conditions, we do know that there's infrastructure that needs addressing. A lot of this infrastructure is, it needs some help. We're pumping the water as fast as we can, but there's too much rain and the pumps can't quite keep up. And so we have to look at alternative strategies. And a lot of that is how can we store this water to allow for more time for those pumps to catch up, so that the water is not entering people's houses and damaging people's cars. We do know that flooding is an issue, and I don't think that's a surprise for anybody that lives here, or really anybody that lives in New Orleans. This is a map showing the existing flooding. I've put a black box around the project area just to help define it. And so when there's some other later slides, it's easier to orient yourself. So the phase 1 are those 2 yellow highlighted streets, Robert E. Lee and Elysian Fields. And you can see the different colors, the purple and the blue and the light blue. Those show areas that have flooding during a 10-year storm. And so that helps us identify areas that we want to address. So same black box, yellow highlighting. This takes the improvements that we're proposing with this project and then puts them into the stormwater model, and then we can figure out the results. We can figure out how much reduction in flooding there will be during a 10-year storm. And for the dark blue areas, that's between 2 feet and 6 inches of water surface reduction. But the yellows and oranges, those are all different amounts of flooding that's being reduced. And so you can, if you can recall back to that first colored map, that there were the areas where there's the most blue, those were the areas that had the most flooding. So we feel like it's successful in addressing the areas that flood the most. This project has the biggest flood reduction impact. And so I think that's helpful in making it a successful project. Then we also looked at the system as a larger whole, and everything within the storm system is interconnected. Pump stations pick up the slack for others depending on where it's raining, where it's flooding. And so by providing storage in this area and reducing flooding in this area, it's also taking some load off of pump station number 19 down towards the south, on the south side of the highway. And so this project is able to realize flood reduction, not just within this project area, but in a larger area within the city. And that's good on its own, but it's also helpful in making the benefit cost analysis meet its goal, because we can realize those benefits from reduction in flooding down towards the south. This is just some graphics, just maybe to help people understand a little bit. The stormwater storage in Elysian Fields. During a normal day, there's a water feature that runs down the length of it. And there'll be pedestrian paths and bridges and exercise places where they can enjoy it as a recreation area. During a rainstorm, when you're not going to be out walking, not the paths, but the area between them, those will fill up with water. And so it'll provide storage of that rainwater within the neutral grounds. And all that storage is rainwater that the pump station doesn't have to pump out right now. It gives them a little bit of time to catch up. And while that water would normally be in someone's house or flooding somebody's car, we're now keeping it within the neutral ground. We're proposing curb bump outs along Robert E. Lee, and those bump outs are on the corners, and we're removing some of the pavement where people can't park and replacing it with a rain garden that will help infiltrate the water. That helps improve the water quality. It also helps with flood reduction by absorbing some of that water and then later releasing it. It also helps pedestrian safety, because by pushing those curb ramps out towards the travel lane and not all the way back on the other side of the parking lane, now people have to cross a shorter distance when they're trying to cross the street. And so there's less chance of them interacting with cars. And so it makes for a safer avenue for pedestrians to get around. So we're really excited about some of the playgrounds that are included. And so we've got pictures of some of the equipment that's been selected. And so they're really exciting. There's slides and playgrounds and wind chimes. There's more slides, and there's jungle gyms that you can climb on. There's logs that you can climb on they're also supposed to look very nice, and so that's very interesting. There's toddler playgrounds for the smaller kids. It's really good. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and so those would just be perfect for them. And more climbing equipment and jungle gyms and balance beams. And so I think all these will be a really good enhancement for the neighborhood. We also know how hot it is during the summer months, and in order for people to want to go out and play on those playgrounds, they'll need some shade structures, and so we're including shade structures to lower the temperature, to provide areas that aren't quite so hot. So I think those will make it a lot nicer. Then the walking paths that go throughout the project, we hope that they're nice enough where people will just want to walk along them, and we think they will. But we've also included little stations that they can stop at if they're out to exercise, and so they can do fitness on cycling equipment or resistance equipment or other types of things. So there's exercise equipment along the way, so you can create your own route and have active fitness. Then along both Robert E. Lee and Elysian Fields, there's protected bike lanes. And those, it's very important. It's one of the city's goals, but it's also important for how this project functions to have a complete streets aspect to allow multimodal transportation options. And so for bikes, there's different ways to do it. There's share the road, where bikes and cars are in the same lanes. Then there's bike lanes where they're right next to each other. But the best alternative is protected bike lanes, where they're separated from car traffic with a buffer area, and then the little plastic bollards that help provide that separation. And so we've included those along the project streets to create safe biking avenues. The protected nature of these bike lanes make it so inexperienced bike riders are more comfortable riding their bikes along the streets because they don't feel like the cars are that close to them. They're less concerned about people hitting them. And so that was one of the important features that we needed to include in the project. These are some of the renderings that we've put together that just help envision how it'll look in the end. Pedestrian paths that go along the streets, pedestrian bridges that cross over, enhanced landscaping and vegetation. You can see all the trees that we've included. Some of those are transplanted live oaks from within Elysian Fields. A lot of them are new trees that we've included. I think we're increasing the amount of tree coverage by 3 or 4 or 5 times as much as existing. And so there should be, it should be really evident how much landscaping has gone into this project. This is one of the playgrounds that shows where there's a nice safe space for people to take their kids, and they'll be able to play on it. And there's the rubber surface below to make sure it's safe. I just think it looks really nice, and it'll be a great addition to the project. There's step downs where you can kind of step down to the water to interact with it or sit and relax on a nice day. There's some of the exercise equipment in the center of the picture. This also shows the water feature that runs down along it. I think there's a fountain that's shown in the background, but there'll be fountains along here to help aerate the water and prevent nuisances. Open spaces where you can go and have a picnic or just enjoy a nice day. Seating. So it should feel like a very nice recreational park. So in order to make this project successful, it has to provide more benefits than it incurs costs. And the costs include both the capital expenditures as well as the operation and maintenance and replacement of equipment as it breaks over the lifespan of the project. So to balance out those costs, we've looked at all the benefits. It's included in the triple bottom line. And so that's social, environmental, and financial benefits. The biggest increases we found have been increases in property values and flood damage reduction, as well as recreation, water quality, and education. And so we found that the benefits outweigh the costs over the lifespan of this project by $55 million. And so that gives us a benefit cost ratio of 2.4. And so anything over a 1.0 means that there's more benefits than there are costs. And so we're very happy with that analysis, and it shows that this is a very beneficial project to the neighborhood. So the schedule that we're on is we've submitted the 90% design this month. We'll answer some additional comments and make some additional changes to address anything else that's left outstanding. And then that'll allow the city to bid this project out, and the contractor can begin construction starting this winter. And then using that time frame, construction will be complete on the project in the fall of 2022, which fits with the fits with the funding for these projects. So we're on track there. And so that's where we are with the 90% design. We're really excited about it and can't wait for construction to start and then the project to finally be realized. There's additional information if you would like to go look at it at nola.gov/resilience. We have a text survey that you can participate in by texting the number on the screen with blue-green. And then Natalie Manning is able to field any questions and direct it towards the appropriate person.
Thank you, Will.
Okay.
Thank you, Will. So what you're seeing in these slides is that this is not just a stormwater management project. You know, we have play spaces integrated. We have the water storage being done in a way that enhances the landscape and provides opportunities for recreation. I'd like to start this one off a little bit differently and open up the committee comment with Parks and Parkways.
Hey, yeah, I appreciate how far along the design has come. I think you actually are at 90%. I really only had a couple of questions in terms of the playground placement. I didn't remember it being where it was on two different sides of the roads, or maybe I made that comment before, but having the two playgrounds on I guess it's on Elysian Fields on either side of Fillmore, if I remember right.
I think it's Apprentice.
Apprentice, sorry. If those are two different age groups and I'm a parent that has two different age children, then I have to make, a Solomon decision of which one do I